If you live in Washington State, this message is for you, especially if you live anywhere between Bellingham and Linwood. My name is Collin Richard Carlson, and I am running for Congressman for Washington State's 2nd Congressional District. To understand the policies that we are writing, you have to understand where this country has been for the last 40 years. I'm going to break it down real quick. Looking at this first graph, we get to see the contributions corporations have made to our overall federal revenue. As you can see, corporations used to account for a little over 30% of our overall federal revenue. That money used to contribute to federal programs such as Social Security, veterans benefits, infrastructure, and much, much more. This means that as corporations are paying less and less, someone has to pick up the tab. Let's take a look and see who that might be. In our next graph, you can see the breakdown of taxes taken based on your particular income. As you can see, the top 1% gets to see a lovely and massive tax cut after the horrible year of 1978. By the way, pay attention to that number 1978, because everything that happens after that is going to have a pattern that's pretty hard to ignore. As we have already seen, corporations went from paying 30% down to 9.9%, and wealthy, they had a massive tax cut as well. Now this all makes sense when the world is run by a political party that genuinely seems to hate its own country.
All right, let's turn back to Donald Trump. You heard Boris talking about how different he's going to be. Well, he's already working to drain the swamp. The president-elect working to slash government spending and shrink our bureaucracy.
This next graph shows exactly what happens when you give tax breaks to the wealthy and large corporations, when you open up free trade and sell our workforce down the river. You get a GDP that continues to rise with the average American or average American incomes simply not rising with it. So now let's take a look at what this has done to the overall wage of average Americans, simply by looking at the minimum wage over the last few years. Pay attention to this graph. Pay attention to the contrasting colors. The dark blue is the real minimum wage. It's what the real value of the minimum wage is at that time. But the lighter blue is what we're going to be looking at. The lighter blue is, in effect, how far your dollar would go in modern times. Look back at 1968 and you can see that the minimum wage is well below $2. But because of the way that our system was structured, that dollar, or that less than $2 at $2, was worth more like $11. Because the worth of your dollar was way higher than the value of your dollar. Now, look at this graph and that magical number, 1978, and what do you start to see? 1978 rolls around and suddenly the worth of the dollar starts to become level with the value of the dollar. And as you see it in the latter years, especially in the 2010s, which is about where this tries to stop, you start to see the worth become less than the dollar. So your dollar is $7.25 right now, is what it is in 2018. Does that mean that at $7.25 you're going to be able to live a good middle-class life if you have a full-time job? No, it does not, because the worth of the dollar has dropped over the years. Things do get better. As we have seen, massive tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, massive tax breaks for corporations, which has devalued the dollar, made it so that the median income has significantly dropped over the course of the recent years. Let's take a look at how expensive it is to live in America by looking at the Consumer Price Index. This next graph is the Consumer Price Index from 2000 to currently. I decided not to even go before 2000 because we would cry. So, from 2000 up until now, we can see almost everything is rising in cost. See that solid red line just dashing across right through the middle of that? That's healthcare. That's what average Americans are having to pay for healthcare and how expensive it is over the years. Notice that Obamacare has done nothing to slow that cost, to waiver it, to steady it, nothing. Single payer healthcare is really the way to go. So now that we have an idea of where we've been for the last 40 years, let's take a look at where we are right now. The United States federal budget consists of $3.8 trillion. taxed from a pool of $18.5 trillion, our overall GDP. So, if you do the math there, right off the bat, we're only taxing our overall population, people, corporations, all of it inclusive, at about 20.4%. It's actually relatively low for a modern country especially. Now, look at the top 3 things that we spend our discretionary spending on. Number 1, military at about $606 billion. Number 2, interest on the debt at about $229 billion. And number 3 is veterans benefits. So, right off the bat, you can see that our top priority seems to be strengthening our military. I'm here to change this. There's 5 ways that we're going to do this. First and foremost, we are going to use our federal budget to cut and eliminate bills that average Americans face every single day. We're going to have a single-payer healthcare system, tuition-free college, etc., etc. When we cut bills that average Americans have to pay, it's as simple as this. They get to keep more of their paycheck. They can keep more of their paycheck, they can accumulate wealth and break their cycle of poverty that most Americans are stuck in. Secondly, if it's not obvious, we need to restore the taxes on both corporations and the top 1%, back to what they were before. You need to do this because greed is something that we cannot control, but we can prevent. And how do you prevent it? You tax the things that you want to try to, lower. That's why we have sin taxes, so that we can lower rates of consumption for smoking or for drinking. You raise the taxes on the wealthy, you lower the greed levels that they have. Greed levels on Wall Street. Greed levels from those who are part of the military-industrial complex. It's not too difficult. If you don't want them doing it, you simply tax them a lot more. People say that the rich and the wealthy are those who create jobs. Unfortunately, in the real world, rich people are more like a leech, and if you let them get too fat, they'll simply suck the life out of you. Third thing that we gotta do is we simply need to raise wages. On $7.25, can you have a house, a car, take care of your kids? You need to simply raise the wages. And this is something that is absolutely possible. Jeff Bezos is the richest man on the history of the planet. And a majority of his associates, the people that work under him and help him make this profit, are living in poverty. Meanwhile, he is making hundreds of billions of dollars, rivaling that of some nations. He doesn't need all that money. I guarantee you, he doesn't need all that money. But you know who does need all that money? The thousands of people who are employed for him, who rely on him for their source of income to take care of their families. You raise the wages, the federal minimum wage, and you force employers like Jeff Bezos to pay his associates a fair wage. We're on 4. We got 1 more left after this. Give tax breaks to lower middle class families. Now this is where you can be Republican all day long and be all about these taxes that are killing our families. Let me give you an idea of a tax for lower and middle class families that we just don't need. Has anybody heard of a thing called tax on tips? It's essentially a gift that one consumer is giving to their server to say, hey, you did an excellent job. Here's a gift, a little extra for your incredible work. We tax that. Why did we start taxing tips? We had to get money from somewhere, and tax breaks for the wealthy just had to happen. I mean, the wealthy just needed their tax cut. So that's when we started seeing weird taxes like tax on tips. We're going to eliminate that. ATM fees, overdraft protection. The fact that a bank charges you is the most illogical thing I can think of. Hey, you're broke. You better not be broke. What are we going to do to your brokenness? We're going to charge you more money. Last but not least, this ties in with the first point, but I really want to drill this point in. We need to use our federal budget to invest in the public, not invest in Wall Street and the military. It has to be invested in the public. Public housing. We need better rehab centers so we can get rid of America's #1 problem, which is right now, if you're under the age of 50, the most common way that you're going to get killed is a drug overdose. We need to invest in rehab centers, in national parks, in public housing, allowing people a chance to recover from the economic hardships that have been drilling them for the last 40 years. We have not been investing in the people. So once again, my name is Collin Richard Carlson, and I am running for Congressman in Washington State's 2nd Congressional District. This has been my economic history report, as well as a little insight into the policies that I plan on writing. Now, if you want to be a part of this campaign, it is Collin for Congress 2018. You can find us on Facebook, Google+, YouTube. You can also email us at collinforcongress@gmail.com. Send us your email and we can get you into our Google Docs so that you can add your own flyers or pamphlets to the campaign. You can get a list of the other resources that we have, as well as a schedule of our events coming up in the next few months. Please like us, share us, tell your friends about this, because this is an all-inclusive movement. The main goal of this campaign is to bring all peoples together, united around a core economic plan that is meant for all Americans. And for those of you who've been waiting, it's time to join the revolution.